try to touch love first. Oh, I know it feels like it hurts too much. If you love first, well, I promise it's worth the risk you take. Nothing better you can do with your days. Nothing better you can do with your days.
Thank you. May all beings be at peace. May all beings be free of suffering. May all beings remember who they are. I was really excited about this particular title. Jesus said, "A great metaphysician." And the first draft of this talk turned out to be a 2-hour college lecture for a theology class. And I decided that didn't work too well. And I had to sit down with that for a while because I'm used to teaching classes too sometimes. I had to sit down with it and ask myself what was missing. I mean, because it had a lot of good stuff in it, but it was all up here. I said, well, how do we get here? And it began to dawn on me that something I missed, and I think perhaps a lot of us who might have been attracted to more of the new thought religions or schools of spirituality, is we got hooked into the message, which was really, really important, obviously, because it didn't destroy the old message, but it was so much more, there was so much more truth to it. It really did open our hearts and let go of a lot of blame, shame, and guilt. That's stuff that we've been carrying around with us for centuries. But I began to realize that it's not just the message, it's the presence. I'm sure there have been teachers in your life, at least I hope there have been, whom you probably remember to this day. And you might not even remember what they taught you. You might not even remember what subject they taught you. But what you did recall was their presence with you. And how on some level of their being, maybe without even trying a whole lot, is that they just simply honored your presence. And they were open to your questions, they were open to how you were searching for things, and they were willing to give a part of themselves to you back, no matter what subject matter might have been. And it began to become a little bit more clear to me that Jesus' role as a metaphysical teacher was not just a whole bunch of nice ideas, because it was that too. But it was his presence that allowed the message to become alive, that allowed the message to become real. And sometimes I find myself missing that reality, getting more in touch with the message than I am with the presence. And so what I began to discover as I was putting this together was exactly what I talked about in my meditation this morning. Our meditation this morning certainly wasn't mine. Of what would it be like to be in the presence of unconditional love? What would it be like to see this as the meaning of Jesus and his teaching? Not words, not books, not paraphrase, not warmed over lessons, not interpretation of somebody else's interpretation, but the truth and reality of what it would be like and what kind of response it would make if I was in the presence of unconditional love. How would that affect me? How would that affect how I looked at myself? How would that affect how I looked at you? How would that affect how I look at the world? If I realized no matter what, no matter how I felt, no matter what was going on in the external world around me, that I was still and continually and always in the presence of unconditional love. What would happen to fear? What would happen to being right? What would happen to judgment? What would happen to separateness? Everything we see and hear today through all of these channeled works, Course in Miracles and Seth and Abraham and Emmanuel, and innumerable volumes written by innumerable spiritual beings, are all saying the same thing. The only reason why they're attractive is they're dressed up in new clothes. And so we get kind of hooked on the clothes rather than the message. I remember a teacher walked up to a student one time, and the student said to the teacher, "How come you keep telling us the same thing?" And the teacher said, "Because you never listen." There's a story told of the Apostle John, who was the last of the apostles to remain alive here on planet Earth, who was living in a kind of a faraway land, old and somewhat decrepit. And every morning they would wheel him out onto a patio, and he would talk to this group of people that would gather there, who were always waiting. And I mean, this is one of the last people to know Jesus alive. So they were really waiting for this knockout kind of message. And they would all gather every morning, and his friends and disciples would wheel him out onto the patio, and he would look out at the front of this group of people and go, "Little children, love one another." And then he would turn around and go back. And everybody would go, "What, was that it? What's the rest?" And what he was saying was, there is no rest. That's it. If you could get that through your thick heads, little children love one another, you wouldn't have to do anything else. There would be no other place you would have to go. It's right there. Little children love one another. And maybe it's the message itself as well as the presence that was so radical that it took 2,000 years to begin to recognize as being the truth. And we're still doing that. We're still understanding the radicalization of that. To love your neighbor, to do good to those who hate you. In the East, they make a distinction between a teacher and a guru. Teacher will say, teacher shows the way. The guru is the way. That sound familiar? I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am. So are you. I become so wrapped up and so enamored of my own presence, or the presence of, I think, of one or two other people, that I forget how deeply, deeply, deeply we are connected with one another. How I lose track of that one. How I lose track of the presence of unconditional love when I fall into judgment, when I turn on the television. Even when I'm sitting down meditating and I can't seem to quiet my mind, and I get back into judgment, says, this must be something wrong with me. Little children, love one another. So what I did was I sat down and I just allowed some thoughts to come to me of some ways that this teaching and this message and this presence could sort of come together with each one of us. And so the first one that occurred to me was this phrase, this idea that somehow or another we have so terribly, terribly distorted. And that is, "Oh Lord, I am not worthy." And so much of it comes down to feeling or experiencing ourselves as being worthy of unconditional love, which is garbage. If you go back to the original story, there was a guy who was in charge of the synagogue. Sometimes he was a Roman centurion, but he had servants under him. And he came up to Jesus and he said, "Jesus, would you please heal my servant?" And Jesus said, "Where do you live?" "Well, down the road." "Well, show me where you live." And he started following him, and the guy said, "No, wait, stop. Oh Lord, I am not worthy thou should enter under my roof, but only say the word and I shall be healed. My servant shall be healed." In other words, I don't want to bother you. I don't want to take your time. You can work the miracle of healing my servant right here, right now, in this place you're standing. You don't have to go 6 miles away. It doesn't have anything to do with me being bad or being limited or being wrong or being unworthy. I don't want to waste your time. You can do that miracle right here, right now. That's all it's saying. And so that particular phrase was adopted by a whole bunch of people who thought, this is a great way of controlling everybody else, because if they don't feel worthy, then they're going to have to come to me to get worthiness. And so immediately, as soon as that message got out there, as distorted and as twisted as it might have been, we started looking out there for the truth rather than in here. Oh, Lord, I am not worthy. Baloney. You don't do anything to become worthy. You already are unconditional love. You already are worthy. There's nothing that can get in the way of that. That's why we say the kingdom of heaven is within you. Where else could it be? And if it's within you, it's within everyone and everything else. Even Paul said this, absolutely nothing can separate you from the love of God. Nothing. Not even how you think, how you feel, not even your sense of unworthiness that it wasn't even yours to begin with. Nothing can get in the way. Nothing. How are you loved? I love you, Jesus said, with an everlasting love. If I could get that one, just get it, how would my life be different? How would my relationship to myself be different? How would my relationship to you be different? I love you with an everlasting love. The people he had the most run-ins with, the scribes and the Pharisees, were the people who said, you are what you do. You are what you look like. You are what you appear like. And if you follow these rules and regulations, then you are okay. And if you don't, there's something wrong with you. And the biggest objection he had was, that's not who you are. You are a divine child of God, and there's absolutely nothing getting in the way of that. So you screw up once in a while. So you mess up once in a while. So you make a mistake, so you fall asleep. Does anyone condemn you? Neither do I condemn you. Go your way and sin no more. I'm not judging you. I never have and I never will. I'm not even judging the scribes and the Pharisees. I'm getting annoyed and angry at them because the only way I think that can wake them up. If I keep pushing, maybe they'll realize that whatever it is they're selling isn't what they're supposed to be selling. And there were some who responded to that, Nicodemus especially, who kind of was so scared to let out in public that he was okay with what Christ was saying. But he knew it in his heart. Took Peter, James, and John with him one day and went up to the top of Mount Tabor. And he did something called the Transfiguration. He showed himself as a being of light. And what he was saying to Peter, James, and John and the rest of the other people around later on was, this is who you are too. This is not just me putting on a little light show for you. This is who I am. And because this is who I am, this is who you are. The golden rule. Love God and love your neighbor. The Talmud, the Jewish book of wisdom, says, love God, love your neighbor, all the rest is commentary. Okay? The rest is somewhat irrelevant if you're doing that. Because if you love yourself and love God, you will love your neighbor. Well, how did St. Augustine put it? Love God and do what you please. Okay? That always knocks me out, okay? Because my ego is trying to think of, well, if I love God and I do this, I can do this. No, that's not it. If I love God and love my neighbor, I can do what I please. Everything that I do is going to be a reflection of love. It can't not be. Prayer. The Father knows the prayer of your heart even before it is spoken. Ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find, knock and it shall be open to you. What father would give a child a snake when he asks for a fish? Or a rock when he asks for a loaf of bread? Or a scorpion when he asks for an egg? And if your earthly father would not do something like that, what about your heavenly Father? already knows the needs of your heart before you even speak them. In fact, how many times have you been lost in prayer and me been lost in prayer when I was asking for something that I thought I needed, but it really wasn't what I needed? How many times have I gotten what I asked for sometimes and found out that I didn't want it anyway? The Father knows the prayer of your heart. Can I open myself to that as being the truth and saying, Father, here's what I think I need, here's what I think I want, but you know better than I do. You know better than my limited personality self. And so I'm putting my prayer, my openness, open-heartedness, I'm putting that in your hands. The whole of the New Testament is filled with parables, little stories, koans almost, like Zen koans, that have lessons that are so, first of all, so practical and yet so beautiful. One of my favorites is the Good Samaritan, no, the prodigal son. Because I always identify with the prodigal who kind of, messed up, wanted his money right now, went out, spent it, blew it all on stuff, right? And then is sitting in the pig pen feeding the pigs. And he says to himself, even the servants in my father's house have better food than I have. I know what I'll do. I'll go back to my father and I'll invent this little speech. I'll say, Father, I've sinned against you and against God, blah, 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 blah. And at least things will be better than they were before. So he gets close to his father's, and his father's been looking for him every day, standing at the top of this hill, little old man. And he sees his son in rags and pig poop, walking along the road, coming back home. And he runs to him and embraces him. And the guy has his little speech prepared, Father, I've sinned against God, sinned against. He says, stop. Get him a robe, get him a ring for his finger, kill the fatted calf because my son who was lost has been found. And the essence of that particular parable was that the prodigal son, as far away as he thought he got from his father and his father's love, never left his father's love. It's always there. Son, you might have traveled far in the physical world, but you never left my heart. And the reason why you never left my heart is because you never could leave my heart. Karma. You reap what you sow. You wrapped up the whole karmic message in one little sentence. Didn't write a book about it. Didn't write 10 books about it. Didn't write a big philosophy book about it. Didn't go into past lives. Didn't go into this. Didn't go in. He said very simply, you reap what you sow. You reap what you sow. Wow. Addictions and attachments. It's easier for a rich man to pass through a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. That was not an impossibility. That was sort of a Middle Eastern metaphor. There was a gate in Jerusalem that was called the eye of the needle. That in order for a camel carrying a full load to get through it, the camel had to kind of go down on its knees almost and crawl through. So it's a difficult trip. But one of the most beautiful things and most sad moments in Scripture was when the rich young man talked to Jesus and said, what do I need to do to be saved? And he said, well, obey the commandments, do this. And he said, I do all those things. And he said, if you will be perfect, if you really want to follow the path, let go of all of that stuff you own, because that's not who you are. That's a rather free translation, but I think it's pretty close to the truth. And it says, the rich man looked away and walked away because he had many possessions. God, that's heartbreaking. I can't do this because I'm so attached to these things because I think they are who I am. I could go on with this for another few hours, okay, but I'm not going to. Faith. If you had the faith the size of a mustard seed and you said to that mountain, get up and walk, it would. Now, this is not a judgment I have on myself, but I wonder, where is my faith? If I tell a little grain of sand to move a couple of centimeters, I can't do that yet. But I do believe it's true. If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to that mountain, get up and walk, and it will. We do that all the time in unity with healing. When I hold you in the light and the truth of who you... That's what Jesus did. How did Jesus heal people? Again, this is a message and a lesson that comes from energy, not necessarily somebody saying something. But essentially, the way he healed people, my sense of this is, I see the truth in you, I see the perfection in you, I even see the perfection in your body. And my sense of your perfection is so powerful that it overcomes your sense of illness and limitation. Wow, what can I learn from that one? Holding yourself in that light. Holding others in that light. Couple more. What do you do with the outside world? Do you deny that? Say it's an illusion? Scribes and the Pharisees were trying to trap him one afternoon by asking him a question very similar to that. Who do we pay? What do we do with taxes? Who do we pay tribute to? He said, show me a coin of tribute. Whose face is that on there? Caesar's. Again, a one-liner. Render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. Not, well, don't pay any taxes, they're all heathens. Now, each one of us is going to have a dope out what that means to each one of us. I'm not going to tell you what that means. But it is such a beautiful, concise message all in one particular spot. What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to deny the outside world, pretend that it's not there, make it into an illusion? Or am I supposed to deal with that in the best way I know possibly how, connecting to my own spiritual alignment with the truth of who I am and the truth of who God is for me? What's important in life? What are my values supposed to be? How do my values affect me? Wherever your heart is, there your treasure is also. Talk about a way of being able to become aware every moment of every day of what's going on with me and how I'm responding to the world, and whether I'm responding to the world with the highest vibration possible. Where your heart is, there your treasure is also. Here's the whole message. Nothing truly exists except unconditional love. And I will give you the strength and the wisdom and the courage to be able to put it into practice. Because in truth, the message is a reflection of who you are. Not what somebody told you, not what you learned from your family, not what you learned from your church, nothing that you learned from your own limited consciousness, but a reflection of the truth of who you are. And when you call to mind and heart the presence of the Christ consciousness with you and to you and through you, there is absolutely nothing, absolutely nothing that can get in the way of your truth.